I want you to get to know your neighbors, I want to answer your questions, and I want you to watch a show this week. Next on The Sunday Show.
We're sorry, the number you have dialed is not in service at this time.
Hey everybody, welcome to The Sunday Show. The Sunday Show is where I sit down and talk at the internet for 20 minutes or so about stuff that's been rattling around inside my brain for the last week. In the A block, I'm going to talk to you about something I probably should have mentioned last week because it's going to happen this Tuesday, but I figure I want to talk to you about it anyway this week. The B block, as always, is where I'll answer your questions in a Q&A format, and in the C block, it's time to talk about robot lions. So the first Tuesday of August every year is National Neighborhood Night Out. And the National Neighborhood Night Out is something that I've participated in now here for the last, oh my goodness, it is 19 years that I have been participating in this since I moved to the particular neighborhood that I live in to this day. I moved here in 1998, and I have been here ever since. I even bought the house that I was renting at the time because I thought the neighborhood was really cool. And one of the reasons why I thought the neighborhood was really cool was because the neighborhood had certain events that we participated in. We came out of our homes and we met our neighbors. And so the one I want to talk to you about is National Neighborhood Night Out and why you should try to participate in one this year. And if your neighborhood doesn't do one, why next year? I mean, it might not be too late. Monday you might still be able to register. But if it's too late now, definitely think about participating in it next year. So National Neighborhood Night Out is an annual event where neighbors come out of their homes or apartments, because you don't have to be in the classic neighborhood in order to make it happen. It can be in apartment housing, in duplex housing, or housing, wherever people live. Whatever neighborhood that they live in, whatever block that they're on, they can organize and hold a neighborhood night out. Neighborhood Night Out has a lot of activities that you can basically craft for yourselves, tailor-make for your kind of neighborhood. My neighborhood is a mix of everybody. We have working class folks, my age, younger, families, retired, people without children. Our neighborhood's a pretty nice cross-section of the different types of people that you're going to find in the neighborhood, and you can set up a night out to basically meet everybody's needs. It's really simple. National Neighborhood Night Out started in 1984. Fast forward 34 years, and National Night Out has spread across the country. 38 million neighbors in 16,000 communities across the country participate in Neighborhood Night Out. Neighborhood Night Out does a lot of wonderful things. First and foremost, it allows you to get to know your neighbors. I'm stunned at the number of friends that I have who don't know who their neighbors are. I know everyone on my block, and I know everybody a block down in just about every cardinal direction. And a lot of that is credited to Neighborhood Night Out. A lot of it is based on the idea that on a very nice afternoon and evening in August, everybody comes out of their homes and everybody gets together and everybody participates in really cool activities, as well as has a great barbecue grill dinner. Now at my local Neighborhood Night Out, there are all sorts of things that are going to be happening. First and foremost, I cook the food. Everyone brings side dishes and desserts, and sometimes they do steal the show. But when it comes to grilling animal protein, that is my job, and I've been grilling for our neighborhood for the better part of 2 decades. And I think I do a pretty good job. No one's come and told me they've gotten sick. No one's died. I think I do a good job. In addition to food, and there's a lot of food, we also put together activities for the kids on the block. And part of how we do that is when you register for Neighborhood Night Out, we go to the city and we register that we're going to run one. And on the day of Neighborhood Night Out, they provide us with street close signs. We are authorized by the city to block off each end of the street on our block so that our kids can go out on their skateboards, and they can go out on their rollerblades, and they can go out on their bikes, and they can bike in the street to their heart's content and know that they're not going to be in the way of traffic. We put kids out there, throw frisbees, wiffle ball, all that sort of stuff. From time to time, I've been known to pull out the air cannon and some water balloons and maybe just water, because air cannons. But your neighborhood night out may not be full of lots of little ankle and knee biters and preteens and teenagers. You may have a neighborhood that might be more retired, more middle-aged individuals, and for that we also set up, we have a grand Farkle that we do. And it's the only time I ever play Farkle, is at neighborhood night out. I don't mind the game. It's not a game I play on a regular basis. Neighborhood night out is when I try to pretend that I can win that game, because it's rolling dice, and if you know me, rolling dice is not what I hate rolling. Unless it's a game where it's like GURPS. GURPS asks you to roll low, and I can do that. But anybody else who wants me to roll high, it's just not a thing. Neighborhood night out is a great way also to figure out who has come and who has gone. Most of the time when I meet new neighbors, not usually directly on my immediate block, because I see the comings and goings, and that doesn't happen all that much. But people in surrounding blocks, new faces that show up. It's like, oh, hey, who are you? Get to meet you. Find out who you are and what you do and all that sort of stuff. And you typically find that the people around, the people who've come and gone, when they come into our block and they get the invitation, they show up and they say, wow, I've never done anything like this before. This is really cool. And so what's really nice is, to make, one thing that we make certain that we do is we have some very active social bodies on our block who kind of take it on themselves to be kind of the orchestrators of of National Night Out, but also to be a part of the bigger idea of Neighborhood Night Out, which is, of course, the year-long effect that Neighborhood Night Out has, which is getting to know and associate with the people who are living around you. And that's kind of what I want to talk about next, is why ultimately, like Neighborhood Night Out, has some great year-round benefits that you, in your home and in your neighborhood, that you can enjoy. Ultimately, hosting a neighborhood night out gives you an opportunity to discuss with your neighbors how you can participate to help ensure that your neighborhood is safe, and that if you have a crime problem in your area, how you and your neighbors can ultimately get together to talk about and develop strategies on how to combat that crime. Now, Neighborhood Night Out is a part of the larger Neighborhood Watch program that's been around since the 1970s, where neighbors get together and, in conjunction with local law enforcement, again, develop strategies on how to observe and report and ultimately deter crime. Now, Neighborhood Night Out is a great way to break the ice with your neighborhood if you don't have a crime watch set up, where the Neighborhood Night Out, you invite everybody in, you have a great social time, and then you and the help of local law enforcement can talk about, hey, set up a community watch. Every year, we'll get either a couple of police cruisers, or we'll get a fire engine that comes through, and the representatives will talk to our community, at our Neighborhood Night Out, and they'll have stuff for the kids. Like, my kids get to climb inside a police car or fire engine. They have a good time, and the police or the fire fighters talk to us about recent trends and how it's important to be in a watch situation. And it's a good way to have, like, the city also help reinforce and validate either maintaining a neighborhood watch or getting involved in a neighborhood watch. Neighborhood watches are a good thing to have in your community, although it's kind of tough to quantify why. I've done light research. I'm not a criminal justice scholar or anything. I've done some light research over the last couple of days on the internet. And it seems to me, from looking at a large amount of just headlines and research reports and stuff, that more often than not, it's beneficial for you to be in a community watch, either starting it or supporting it by getting your community together for social activities such as Neighborhood Night Out. And you can look at a 2008 U.S. Justice Department meta-analysis study that looked at crime prevention studies from the late 70s through to the early 90s, where they determined that neighborhood watches were effective in reducing crime upwards of 16%. That report will also tell you why they don't know what the actual causation is. Can you reduce your crime by 16% because you're on the watch for it, and that if you see the stickers in people's homes, we're a crime watch neighborhood, does that deter criminals? Or is it because you're coordinated and reporting to the police that the police are aware of crimes and are actively investigating and solving those crimes, thereby removing more of the criminal element because the community is working with law enforcement on either the resolution of or prevention of crime? And so, regardless of what the actual mechanism is, this metadata analysis that suggests that being in a neighborhood watch program can have positive benefits on reducing crime in your community. There are studies out there, however, that do suggest that Crime Watch isn't necessarily effective for everybody. There was a National Institute of Justice, University of Maryland study done back in 2002 that said, yeah, you're going to see neighborhoods reduce their crime if the neighbors trust each other, or their economic standing. So middle-class communities have a greater chance of enjoying crime reduction because they are more likely to trust their neighbors, and in lower economic status communities, there is more isolation and more distrust amongst neighbors. This study found that makes getting a group together or a small disjointed community watch less effective. I think that this study goes a long ways to the point that I'm trying to make, which is it's time to start trusting our neighbors. It's time to start looking at people who are living next door or living people a floor down or whatever situation that you're in, and actually give it the college try to say, you know what, I don't necessarily know if this is going to work, but there is literally no harm in trying, and maybe there are other people in my neighborhood who desperately do want to reach out and connect, but are afraid to because there's just a lot of fear. America does a very good job of cultivating fear in its citizenry, and so one of the strongest ways that we can help reduce crime in our own communities runs directly against one of the things that we're always told that we're supposed to be. We're supposed to be afraid of everything, including our neighbors. And that's a shame. We should be at the point where we are going to be trusting of the people who we live with and live next to and live across the street from, and take the chance to be able to and get to know each other. Maybe the person across the street seems aloof and reluctant because they're just as scared as maybe you are, and that maybe the person's is closer to you than you thought on all sorts of different aspects of life. Maybe the house two down is always loud and raucous because at the end of the day, there's no insulation in their house, and you can just hear everything. And if their house was properly insulated, maybe they'd be as quiet as any other house. So until we reach out, knock on other doors, send out invitations for something like Neighborhood Night Out, get to know our neighbors, we'll never know to what extent they're just like us. We'll never know to what extent that we can stop being afraid of them. Yes, there are times where you look out the window and maybe there is something going on in that house that you're looking at and going, but that's the reason why you have Neighborhood Watch, is so that you and your other neighbors can get together and knock on that door and say, look, don't bring this into our neighborhood. It sounds scary to do, but I've been on, I guess I'll call them interventions, where my neighbors and I go and knock on someone's door and say, look, we get it, you're new in our neighborhood, but there are certain things that can't happen. And it sometimes works, people come around, and sometimes people get the message that we're watching them and we expect them to behave, and then they leave. And I'll tell you, it was a scary thing to sit there with a group of other people and say, you know what, these folks could brandish a weapon, we could get over our heads really fast. But by talking to these people, we got to know the situation a lot better, and we were able to say we saw a problem and we were able to solve it on our own in a more of a community fashion, instead of relying solely on law enforcement to come in and take care of all of our problems. I tend to think that neighborhood watches, neighborhood night out will ultimately help you reduce crime in your region. There was a much more recent study done by the University of Oregon looking at communities in Medford, creating neighborhood watches and having people connecting better. And it found that neighborhoods could reduce crime by upwards of 18% by, again, creating watches, working with local law enforcement on just how to simply keep an eye on things and make certain that things are going on, and make certain that if things are going on that you are not sure about, that you contact law enforcement so they can come in and do the appropriate amount of investigation. So there are a lot of things that I would recommend that you do. If you're watching this video and saying, hey, I'd like to give this a shot, what can I do to help build a community that is aware of what's going on around it and what we can do to help make certain that we live in a community that is safe and welcoming for all people who want to live in a safe and welcoming community? Well, first and foremost, I want to try to stress, and law enforcement will tell you the same thing. Neighborhood Watch, they're not vigilantes. You're not supposed to take like the law into your own hands. So when I had to, when I was spending my nights when I was in college, watching the street, our problem house, we had somebody leaving the house and vandalizing neighbors' homes. When I watched the individual who was performing the vandalizing, I could have, I'm Batman, and gone and dealt with it, but instead I picked up the phone, I called the police, the non-emergency number, because it didn't feel like a 911 thing for me. I call the non-emergency number and say, yeah, this is in regards to ticket, da-da-da-da-da-da-da, Detective so-and-so is working on this. The person who's doing the vandalizing is literally out of the house and vandalizing other places right now as we speak. And that's all that it took, because it was summer and I was in college, and I told my neighbors, hey, I'll pull the night shift. And I had no problem sleeping during the day because it was summer, it was hot, and I got to sleep through it. It was fine. And I kept an eye out on things, in the evening. But the most important thing was that I was not a vigilante. It was not my job to stop the crime. It was my job simply to report the crime. Other things that you want to consider about doing is, if you're looking at starting, first and foremost, if you want to host a neighborhood night out, you got to canvass your neighborhood. You got to go door to door. You got to knock on people's doors and you have to introduce yourself. Hi, my name is, I'm your neighbor just down the street, and I'm looking at starting a neighborhood watch, or on Tuesday night, I know it's last minute, but you can do this Monday, say, you know what, tomorrow night we're going to have neighborhood night out. I'm going to be growing some stuff out in the driveway, feel free to bring a dish or whatever. And then that's when you can have a flyer about Crime Watch, Neighborhood Watch, and the benefits of it. And distribute those during the time, and maybe have a member of law enforcement come by and say, we're really happy that you want to start a neighborhood watch here, and we're really happy to be partners in this, and here's some things that you can do. Speaking of flyers, you got to make certain that as you're canvassing the neighborhood, you're keeping track of the people who are living there. The United States is a nation of immigrants, and we are constantly bringing in people from all over the globe every year. So you have to make certain that if you're going to be passing out flyers for a crime watch, or you're going to be passing out flyers for Neighborhood Night Out, you need to be prepared to put those flyers into other languages. That's just a reality of living in a multinational, multilingual world. So you've got to have your stuff in English, but you have to have your stuff in Spanish maybe. You have to have your stuff depending on where you are, right? In Oregon, it's very, very easy to move very quickly into a neighborhood that in some parts of the Central Valley, you can be English to Spanish to Russian in the blink of an eye. And so know your neighborhood, know your neighborhood's languages. It says a lot to somebody when they see that you're prepared to communicate with them in their native tongue. Again, if you're talking about building community, and if you're talking about impacting your neighborhood in a positive way, that's one of the strongest things that you can do, is make certain that you acknowledge other people, acknowledge their ethnicities, acknowledge their languages, and welcome them and embrace them with documentation that they can read. But Curry, I hear some of you say, I don't think my neighborhood needs a crime watch. Well, that might be true, but do you know that for sure? One of the things that you can do to determine whether or not you feel that it's necessary to do this is to go down to your city's police station and do the analysis on your particular part of the city. The police in the city keep statistics and crime rates, and if you find that you're in a neighborhood, maybe where you're living has been, for whatever reasons, overlooked or ignored, or maybe criminal elements have chosen against it, but if your neighbors are being savaged, if people a block over are being savaged, and you don't communicate with your neighbors and you don't know who your neighbors are, then you may come to a very rude awakening as to how much crime happens within your sphere of existence. Then you may say it could only be a matter of time before somebody finally walks up to your doorstep with less than honorable intentions in mind. So yeah, it's probably always inherently a good idea to get to know your neighbors and set up a watch and to be able to keep an eye out for each other. But you may have to do a little bit of research to find out to what extent you actually need to do this if you want to help improve the safety for yourself and your neighbors. One of the other things that would be a good thing to consider is, if you're interested in starting it, you'd better be prepared to take a leadership role. Neighborhood watches work best when there is somebody who operates as the point person, who is responsible for recruiting members, who's responsible for disseminating information to the neighborhood, and somebody who's responsible for trying to come up with ways to help delegate certain roles to certain individuals. Retired individuals who may not leave their homes a lot typically take the role of what were called window watchers, where they just keep an eye on things out in the street. They know when it, we used to have a meth house a couple homes down from where I live, and our window watchers did two things. They noted when cars came and left, they took down license plates. And, you know, surprise, surprise, 2 or 3 arrests later, the home went up for sale, and a family is in there now, and it's a home that's not a meth house. It's a home with a family in it, and they're beneficial members of our neighborhood now. And it didn't put anybody at risk, really. The police just knew who was showing up. The police knew the license plate numbers. The people in the house didn't know for sure, because we had people who, from the safety of their homes, just looking out their windows, just recording that information, and we affected positive change on our neighborhood because the system was already in place. So if you are that person who's going to say, I want to build this community, I want to build this small amount of our own, improvement of safety and reduction of crime, then you're probably going to be looked to be a leader. And it doesn't require like a tremendous amount of work. You just have to know everybody in your neighborhood. You have to coordinate a meeting or two, orchestrate a neighborhood night out, and ask people who are available and who are in the right position in order to do certain jobs. So at the end of the day, as a lot of you are, I suspect a lot of you who are watching are students or recently graduated students of mine, and you're finding yourselves moving out into the real world, and you're finding yourselves getting out of college, and you're finding yourselves buying maybe your first home, or maybe you're living in an apartment situation while you're still going to college. I completely encourage you to investigate and to invest in building community. I think that's really the foundation for everything else that can happen that's positive in the neighborhood, is building community. Being brave, knocking on doors, meeting your neighbors, finding out who the people are who live around you, finding out how many people feel the same way about building community that you do, but maybe they were just too scared, or maybe they didn't know what to do to bring that about. When we get to know each other, when we get to know our neighbors, when we get to know people just down the block and down the road, we start to recognize how other people are living, and we get to recognize the differences in other people, and we get to see the trials and struggles and also the successes that other people in our community have, those successes that we can celebrate, and people who are having trouble, people who are running into issues. We're there, we know about it, and we can help. I mean, it's crazy, but, you know, I live on a block where we do everything, and we know everybody's phone numbers, we watch out for everything. If somebody's starting a particular project, somebody's going to have the right tool, and my tools are taking off down one end of the street or the other, or there's a tool that's, like right now, I have an electric chainsaw from one of my neighbors because I'm taking down a hazelnut bush. And I didn't have a chainsaw, but I know where to get a chainsaw. And so it works out really well to build community, get to know people. I mean, get to really know them. Not Facebook know people, not Instagram know people, but really flesh and blood, face-to-face, carbon-based life form to carbon-based life form communication. That's the sort of thing that once that ball gets rolling and we all know where everybody's at and what people are doing and we have faith and trust in our neighbors, then we can build a real community that not only defends itself better against the criminal element, but also does a lot more in sharing the richness of everybody's lives. My neighbors enjoy interacting with my children. They've watched my children grow up. I think that's one of the things that they've enjoyed most about having me as a neighbor, is that they've gotten to participate in the growing up of my two kids. And that's the sort of thing that you have when you are in a neighborhood. I mean, a real neighborhood, one where you are talking to people and you are open to people and you're sharing with people and partaking in everybody's lives. And so start it with Neighborhood Night Out. Start it with Neighborhood Night Out. Make it happen through a shared sense of safety and community, and then watch it evolve into a social network where you'll say later on down the road, wow, I can't believe that we didn't have this sooner. How much better my life is knowing all of these people around me. Trust me, I enjoy it tremendously. It's one of the reasons why I stay in the house I live in. My house is a constant work in progress. There's a lot of old stuff with this house, a lot of stuff wrong with this house. But you can't, I don't think you can buy the neighborhood that I live in. And that's not something that you can add on as a side package. You know, this house comes with this and this and this, and oh, by the way, if you spend a little bit of extra, we'll make your neighborhood really awesome. That doesn't happen. But it can happen for free by knocking on doors, organizing events, taking that one small, brave step to get to know the people who are around you. That's a strong community. That's a better community. That's a safer community, and honestly, a lot more fun. Now we come to the Q&A portion of the program where I answer your questions. I don't get a lot of questions. I know that a few people are watching the video, so leave a question. Leave a question in the comments below. That's why the comments are there. Leave a question. I want to answer questions. I only have like 2. So I'm going to make up 1. So I can answer 3. Because I like to work in 3s. It's kind of weird that way. VeggieHead11 asks, are we in late stage capitalism? Yikes! That's a biggin'. And this is probably in reference to last week's question about a fair and equitable tax situation, or tax plan, where I said that I don't think that we're ever going to have a fair or equitable tax plan as long as we live in the system that we're living in. And that the next stage in our evolution as a culture will probably have to be a complete rethinking about how we operate as a culture and society. I sort of backdoor indicted money as a big problem. And so living in America, of course, we live in a, I don't even know what to call it. I'm sure an economist has coined a term. Capitalism for some, socialism for others, disaster capitalism, I don't know. There's a lot of different things that you can say America has, but like late capitalism is a term that has made a resurgence ever since the Great Recession and the recovery after the Great Recession, where more and more people are being left behind as the difference between the wealthy and the not wealthy continues to grow. The middle class is destroyed. And we have this rise of this like hyper wealthy group that capitalism is now creating consumption for. Like I think it was Nordstrom's, had a pair of blue jeans where they would put the mud on for you for like $1,200 or whatever it was. And like the absurdity of consumer capitalism at a domestic level, and also just the fluidity of international finance, rise of multinationals. I mean, this term, late capitalism, has existed in some form over the course of the last 70 years. Late capitalism was used to describe capitalism in the 1930s when people thought that capitalism was dead. You have to remember that thousands of Americans left the United States and went to the Soviet Union in the 1930s because there was no work in the United States, 25% unemployment, but there was work to be done in the Soviet Union. Now, of course, what many Americans didn't understand was what the price that was being paid under Stalin's 5-year plans to bring that economic vitality to the Soviet Union. But there was work there and there wasn't work here, and people said, look to, an economist scholar said, look to Germany and look to the Soviet Union, look, they're putting people back to work and we can't. Is capitalism in its late stages? Is capitalism dead? And you may have learned about Adam Smith and the Wealth of Nations, and so you have this capitalism that replaces mercantilism as the primary way that countries like Great Britain or the United Kingdom generated wealth. And so this early capitalism is like the 19th century and runs up to like World War I and the Great Depression. And then there's this second stage of capitalism that is the post-war economics, which in theory was supposed to be late stage because capitalism was supposed to be dead, but with the growth of the middle class, a giant redistribution of wealth in the United States, education in the form of the GI Bill, affordable housing, look to the rise of Levitville homes. A lot of things worked against laissez-faire free market forces that created wealth opportunities for people who didn't have access to wealth before, and so you saw this exploding middle class. And so you had increased consumerism, but you didn't have the real wealth stratification, multinationalism that makes up the third stage Mandel describes of late capitalism, where you have globalization, multinationalism, multinational corporations, and also multinational liquidity, vast sums of money across borders. So, I mean, if you're a follower of Mandel, then yeah, we're in late-stage capitalism. But what does late-stage capitalism mean? Late-stage capitalism infers that we're at the end of capitalism. And people have said that we're at the end of capitalism before, and yet certain forces are out there that keep capitalism going. And I think, I'm not an economist, I don't have college classes in here. I can merely tell you what 43 years on this planet and being a student of history has kind of taught me. Capitalism benefits from certain things in our society, okay? First and foremost, capitalism benefits on a mythology of America. And the mythology of America is freedom, right? You come to America, you work hard, you'll work your way up. Well, that's not true for millions of Americans today who are working 2 jobs or 3 jobs and just barely keeping their heads above water. That's late-stage capitalism, probably. At the point where the majority of Americans are going to look at the system and go, okay, the system is fundamentally broken. Because there's this small percentage of people up here who are getting their $1,200 jeans and their $400 lattes that are, you know, gold leafed or whatever. This ridiculous, conspicuous consumption. And then there's the vast majority of everybody else who is barely keeping their head above water. And the American dream seems to have failed them because people are working their butts off. And what's interesting is there are certain forces that keep capitalism afloat, like the American dream, right? If I work hard, I should get ahead. And so instead of fighting against the system capitalism, they try to improve their own lot inside of capitalism. And one of the successful ways was the $15 an hour push. Several states that adopted $15 an hour minimum wages. It doesn't solve for capitalism. It doesn't fix the inherent problems inside capitalism. It just makes people's lives measurably better inside of capitalism. Now, why do we not want to move away from capitalism? I think so the American dream, the second thing that helps capitalism survive and avoid its ultimate demise is because we've been told as a part of our American mythology, so step one, American dream, work hard, you'll get ahead. Number two, socialism bad, right? Even though big chunks of our economy and our lives are socialist. I'm a public education teacher. The entire public education structure is socialism. Everybody pours money into a bucket and the government determines how that money is spent to the benefit of everyone. That's public education. Police, fire, the military, those are all socialism systems. And yet we're told, socialism bad, socialism bad. There are definitely other countries that we can look to say, we can have our capitalism and we can also have like safety and security. Remember what I was talking about in the A block? America does a really good job of telling you what to be afraid of. Well, I'm afraid I'm going to lose my house. I'm afraid that my kids aren't going to get a job. I'm afraid I can't provide for my family. As a public education teacher, there are forces that are out there who are trying to undo what I do for a living. They're trying to destabilize the security of my job, take away my benefits, and if that sort of thing happens, all of a sudden the fear factor goes way up in my life. Am I going to be able to survive in this field of employment? Can I go somewhere else? And so when we have certain mythologies that we believe in, anything socialist is inherently bad, then that's another factor that keeps capitalism going. And you know, I don't think we are in late stage capitalism because capitalism's still going pretty strong. I think that really, like, another thing that allows capitalism to continue to thrive is, I think there's so much mass media out there that serves as kind of like that. If you ever read The Great Gatsby, you know that Jay Gatsby worships Daisy Buchanan and wants to have her as his own. She lives across the bay and her dock has a green light on it and it blinks, and that green light is his beacon and he follows it. And I think the same is true in media today. I don't understand why the Kardashians are so popular. But they live this lifestyle, I guess, that's super attractive to people, that other people think that they can follow, that they can, if they can do anything remotely like the Kardashians, they'll be cool and trendy and hip and stuff. And that's, again, like, fish nibbly pedicures. That's late capitalism, I guess. It's such a ludicrous concept that's probably prohibitively. I've never priced fish pedicures. I only presume that they're probably pretty expensive because the only people I know who have had them are all from wealthy families, I guess. I really should price fish pedicures. Maybe they're within my price range. I don't think they're inside my price range. But media presents that. Media presents all of these, look what the wealthy are doing, and look at the crazy lives they lead, and look at their big houses, and look at their fast cars, and all this stuff. And we look to that, and we say, oh, that's something that we should aspire to. Well, I mean, I don't. I look at fish pedicures, and I'm like, gold-leafed food? Am I eating gold? Is it the sign of wealth to have gold in your stuff, your stool later? Is that really the sign of making it in the world? And so it's a bit perplexing for me. And I guess to answer the question, if we're in late stage capitalism, I guess so, depending on how you want to define it. But do I think that capitalism is going to just be gone in another generation? I just don't think so. I think that there are enough social systems in place to maintain a narrative amongst most Americans that narrative reaffirms capitalism. And just capitalism for me and people like me. Middle class, lower middle class, working class. We're all stuck in the dog-eat-dog world, okay? Because if I ran my finances in my home the way that some of the banks that failed during the economic crisis of 2008, right? And they went to the federal government because we're too big to fail, right? If I ran my home as badly as they ran their businesses and I went to the government asking for a bailout, they'd laugh me out the door, right? So it's capitalism for you and it's capitalism for me, but it's not capitalism for them. They get the bailouts, they get the taxpayer money to keep themselves afloat. There's no incentive to run a good business. And you have to go all the way back. So maybe we are in late stage capitalism because our capitalism doesn't look like the capitalism that Adam Smith advocated for. Oh my goodness, when did he write? 220 years ago when he wrote Wealth of Nations, where he's talking about, look, governments can't get involved in the business affairs because laissez-faire allows for the best product and the best companies, best price, best working conditions, because everybody's operating in their own self-interest. And so if United Airlines dies, I don't know how many times they've asked for bailouts, but when they asked for the bailout the first time, the government's like, no, I'm really sorry, but no, you guys run a terrible business. And if United dies, somebody else takes United's place. And they'll learn from United and say, oh, maybe we shouldn't run a bad company. But the government gets involved. The government provides bailouts. And let's stay with the airlines, right? The government prevents international carriers from having domestic routes. American companies would get better or die if they had more competition. If you and I had more choice. Now, people who are pro-capitalist are always talking about, well, you have to have choice. You have to have choice. But do we really have choice? How many airlines do I really have a choice from? United, American, Delta, Southwest, Alaska. I don't have 15 choices. If I want a good price on a major carrier somewhere, I have a half dozen choices. But if Lufthansa and South Korean Air, British Airways was involved in domestic flights, there was more competition. Airlines would get better. Prices would fluctuate. You could have your choices. And I wouldn't mind paying more money if I had a little more legroom, maybe some better food. But instead, we all run for the cheapest price at the cheapest flight at whatever times because we know we don't have choice anymore. The only choice we have is price. Because we're just used to, well, I am, because I only ride coach, because the hundreds of dollars in upgrades to get a little bit more legroom or a bit better grade of food, again, it's outside of my ability. There's a have and a have-not. I live in the have-not land, and they live in the have land. And so I get stuck in cattle, coach, section, pushed in and pushed around. And so there's no incentive on the part of the airlines to make things better for me. Because they know they've got all of the power. Because the government has allowed a small number of businesses basically to operate as a cartel, controlling the pricing of a good or a commodity. And there's no genuine competition. And competition is antithetical, I guess, to capitalism, because ultimately there's supposed to be one company that wins out over all of the others. So, at that point, does capitalism even exist anymore if you only have, like one day does, like, go back to Demolition Man, right? Taco Bell won the fast food wars, right? What happens if there's one gasoline company? What happens if there's one processed food manufacturer? Kraft runs everything, right? You don't have choice, really. They have all the power, and as consumers, we're just up the creek because those corporations can influence politicians, and I can't. So maybe it's late-stage capitalism for me, but definitely not capitalism for the people who tell me I should be happy for and always constantly supporting capitalism, even though they get more socialism and security and protection than I ever will. Are we in late-stage capitalism? I don't know. Because I don't see capitalism going anywhere in my lifetime, and I don't see capitalism maybe going anywhere in my kid's lifetime. But who knows? I mean, North Korea may launch a nuke next week. They may nuke San Francisco or something, and then we'll enter into a global nuclear war, and then capitalism will be the least of our concerns. Playing all that Fallout 4 will prepare me for the nuclear wasteland. Nah, I'm going to die very early on. Anyway, so, great question. I wasn't prepared for a question that was going to dominate Q&A for 15 or 20 minutes, but hey, it was fun. See, that's why you should ask questions, to get the long, slightly informed ramblings of one Mr. Curry. A little over a year ago, I did a video on modifying the First Order Stormtrooper blaster. And a couple of folks asked me questions on that video. Now, when they asked it, I wasn't making videos. I was on my little hiatus, but I'd love to answer those questions now. And the question is, how was this brassed? Not how was it brassed. What type of brass did I use? And I thought I'd actually said that in the video, but I guess I didn't, so I'm more than happy to go through the brassing of a blaster really quick. Now, brassing is expensive, and brassing is heavy. So I'm going to get that out of the way right now. So those of you who are saying, brassing, no, okay? Just chill, I get it. Brassing is a choice, all right? I like to brass. It's a material I'm comfortable working with. It's a material that I understand well, and I ask it to do X and it does Y and everything's great. But there are a number of materials that you can use out there. So first I'll answer the question, like the type of brass that's in there. So the brass that is typically used for the actual dart itself is 17/32 brass, and so that's going to be something that is going to be the right size. That's the wrong size. Yeah, there we go. So 17/32 brass is going to be the size that the internal diameter is 1/2 inch, so that a dart fits in snug, provides a better seal than the, here I'll grab the barrel, the breech from the blaster I'm modding right now, right? It's the same diameter, but there's a much looser fit. The actual breech is loose until the very end where it tapers in, and that's where the grab is to keep the dart in place. Well, that's great. So for the first 20% of the dart's travel, it's getting a complete air seal, but as it moves down the breech and into the barrel, air is now leaking around the dart, no longer propelling it, no longer providing thrust. So the idea is and I take a drill bit, and I ream out the inside of this orange, or you can just cut this orange completely off and build out of brass an entire breech, and then the darts feed in here. Now it's important that you also ream the inside of the brass material so that the darts will feed in easier and the brass won't completely cut away at your darts. Brass is advantageous for a couple of other things. You can, hang on just a second. So, like you use brass because when you take a piece of 17/32 and you cut a half pipe out of it, it serves as a loading point where then a 9/16 piece of brass can then slide over it, and you have a complete, for the most part, airtight seal so that air can push the dart out completely through the barrel. So to answer the question, it's 17/32 brass that's inside the Stormtrooper, and 17/32 brass inside blasters that I choose to brass. For example, my pistol of choice for pistol rounds is a Cardinal No-No, leaving darts inside the blasters after a war. You get skunky darts. My bad. Okay, brassed, right? But I am an equal opportunity barrel material user. I can mess around with something that's a 1/2 inch. This is 1/2 inch CPVC. And it also works wonderfully well. It's in, again, whatever material that you want to use for a barrel, the internal diameter is approximately 0.5 inches, and you're good to go. Shouldn't be too tight. And also you have to consider where on the globe that you live. Higher temperatures, higher humidity can do wonders that are negative on your darts, and you might find that a 1/2 inch CPVC is actually too tight. You have to find a different barrel material that has a larger internal diameter. But I don't live there, so I don't have to worry about it. Or maybe you want to use a light material, and one that is relatively easily available and incredibly cheap. Can you see it? So this is PETG, PETG plastic. I don't know what PETG stands for, and I'm not going to look it up because I'm not. This stuff's light, easy to work with. You got to make certain that you get the right diameter. Again, this stuff makes great glow darts. I've just used this on my friends from time to time. That's exciting. That's better than stock. But with those, if you've got something that has a lot of barrel, and brass and CPVC would make it very nose heavy, PETG plastic is a beautiful thing for beautiful blasters. Did I mention that Pan War is coming up August 13th? Yeah. Anyway, imagine how heavy this thing would be if it had 20 1/2 inch CPVC pipes or 20 brass barrels on the front of it. It'd be just like, oh, so heavy. So heavy. But it's not. Very little weight added to this bad boy. Pan War, August 13th. You should be there. So this last question wasn't meant to be a question for the Q&A, but it was a question asked of me, and I figure that's good enough until people start putting questions in the comments below. Curry, are you going to play Fortnite? You know, you would think that Fortnite would be right up my alley. If you've been watching what I've been doing, you know that I like base building. It's my favorite part of Fallout 4. And I've talked about being excited about State of Decay 2. It looks like there's going to be some of that in that game, or at least last time I looked, it sounded like that was going to be the case. And so Fortnite's come out, and it's like fighting zombies, and you build a base, and the base has traps and defenses, and you have objectives and stuff to go over. And I think the thing that differentiates why I like Fallout 4 and would play it and not play Fortnite is I kind of need a story to go along with it, and I don't see a story in Fortnite. I could be wrong, but I've watched people play online, and I've read the thing, and I've seen the trailer, and it just feels like you go out and you scour a community, you do a bunch of scrapping, you're given an assignment, you place the Atlas, and then you defend it, and then that's that. I guess if I just wanted to play a zombie first shooter, you know, I would. And The base building, I guess, is an interesting wrinkle in that, but it feels like it's a wrinkle in that. It doesn't feel like it's part of... It's crazy I'm going to say this, but in Fallout 4, I kind of have sympathy for, even though they're ones and zeros. I know that everything in Fallout 4 is ones and zeros, but I have sympathy for these unnamed NPCs who are my settlers and my merchants and things like that. And I kind of want to build something that I can look at and say, hey, look, this is a realistic settlement, and this and the other thing. And I don't feel like I could do that with Fortnite. And Fortnite looks great, and I watch people online play, and they seem like they're having a great time. So I'm not going to... So it's about basically saying, it's not up my alley, since I'm not like a YouTuber who makes his living playing video games. It's not something that I would play. Now, if I were a YouTuber and I had 50,000, 100,000 subscribers and I was expected to play games, I'd be all over Fortnite. Even if I didn't like it, even if it wasn't my cup of tea, because it's the new game and I would want to make certain that my videos are getting out there on new games that are out there. It's just that as a consumer of video games, in a pretty narrow wedge, too. There are a lot of games I don't play. You won't be watching me play a sports game anytime soon. No FIFA soccer, no NCAA football. You won't be seeing me play horror games. You won't be seeing me play Call of Duty, games. Yeah, it looks like a fun game for people who like that sort of thing. Since I'm not somebody who likes that sort of thing, I probably won't be playing it. I know it's really disappointing because it's a cooperative game, and the people who want me to get the game would love to do cooperative with me, and I guess there is value in that, but only so far as I would want to be cooperative with people that I know. I am definitely one of those folks who doesn't just want to go onto an open server and just play like GTA Online, right? I am so uncomfortable with the idea of doing GTA Online with a world that has nobody in it everybody I don't know. At least one person has to be there that I know for me to feel comfortable about GTA Online. That's how much of a, I don't know, whatever word applies to me, I guess is whatever word applies to me. So probably not. I'm probably not going to pick up Fortnite, but just for my own personal, not for any constructive criticism reason of the game. You're probably going to pick up the game and enjoy it, and good on you if that's the case. And that's it for question and answer. Make certain that if you want to hear me answer one of your questions in a very curry way, put the questions down in the comments area below. Time to move on to the last part of the program. Last part of the program is You Need to Watch. And what you need to watch on August 4th is Season 3 of Voltron Legendary Defender on Netflix. Now, I grew up in the 80s. I watched Voltron. I loved Voltron. And it was in college I learned that Voltron was a Japanese series called Go Lion. And I watched Go Lion. I was like, oh my goodness, my childhood. Not a lie, but definitely an alternate universe to what was really intended. There was that very bad Voltron series, late, I don't know, 10 years ago or 8 years ago or whatever it was. I didn't watch it. It looked like garbage, and it only lasted for a little while. But, DreamWorks and Netflix have got a Voltron series that I really think that you can get behind if you're my age and watch Voltron. And if you've never watched Voltron before, go watch it. It's great. And August 4th is this drop for Season 3. And what's really cool about Season 3 is it's only going to be, because Season 4 is going to happen in October, Season 3 is going to be 7 episodes. So I'm going to plow through those 7 episodes, and I'm going to do a non-spoiler review next Sunday for the A block of the Sunday show. So if you want to know what I'm talking about on Sunday next week, you need to watch Season 3 of Voltron Legendary Defender. And if you haven't watched Seasons 1 and 2, what are you waiting for? Go do it now. It's really good. Yeah. They're doing it the way that I could probably spend a Sunday show talking about Space Battleship Yamato 2099 in the same way. 2 of my shows have gotten reboots, and I felt they've been both done very well. Space Battleship Yamato and Voltron, and they've both followed a similar path. First of all, they're both animated very well. It's the 21st century. They look great. They look beautiful. They keep about 75 to 80% of the plot. They put in just enough of a wrinkle here and enough of a wrinkle there to keep it fresh. They bank on nostalgia, but make it different and new so that it's not just a simple, just a carbon copy shot per shot. Now, Yamato, I think, did a great job, better than Voltron in the sense that they kept the music. It's really hard to have Yamato without their music. And for me, the Voltron theme is an epic theme. I love the theme. And it doesn't show up all that much in Season 1 and 2. I think I'll have to rewatch Season 1 and 2 just to try to remember if that music showed up anywhere. It's really weird watching the lions form in this run of Voltron and not hear the Voltron theme. But they've kept a lot of the story, characters, some of the plot, but they've thrown in enough wrinkles to make it new and fresh as well. In a way, I hope it's what they do if they ever get around to making the live-action Robotech. I talked about that last week, but I can't imagine them doing that. I just imagine them making giant robots fighting aliens, and that's that. And that's neither new nor fresh, nor what I want to see. I think that the Sony could watch what's happening with the reboots of, you know, Yamato and Voltron, and they could probably learn a lot from what these guys are doing. Anyway, so what you need to watch is Season 3 of Voltron Legendary Defender. Drops August 4th. Just 7 episodes. There will be a 4th season in October, and definitely looking forward to getting that under my belt now before I have to go back to work. And next Sunday, a non-spoiler review of Season 3. So you'll definitely want to check that out when that comes around next week. So that's it. Episode 4 of the Sunday Show is in the books. I hope you had a good time. I hope that I didn't completely misrepresent late-stage capitalism. I'm not going political all that much. Sorry, this is about as deep into the pool as I'm going to get. Anyway, this week, you can expect not 1, but 2 Nerf videos. I have a review this week, but I also have part 3 of the Interceptor video, where I take something very lemony and make something very awesome out of it. And then, of course, there is a Fallout video dropping right after this video because I missed my deadline last Friday, and then I'll have another Fallout video at the end of the week. If you're living in my neck of the woods, stay inside this week. It is not normal for us to hit 109. I know that that's the norm for folks in other parts of the country, and bless you for being able to live in it, but folks in my part of the woods, my neck of the woods, 107, 109, 111, that's stay in the house, stay cool, stay hydrated, and stay safe. That's my recommendation and plea to those of you living in the valley, in Oregon, in the greater Northwest. It's going to get hot this week, so take care of yourselves. Don't do anything crazy. And as always, may Ryota rise, your X-Wing, up to meet you. May the dark side be always at your back. May your saber shine warm upon your face. The Imperial Walkers fall soft upon your battlefields. And until we meet again, may the Force be with you always.